Hello, thank you for being in a new video. This time I have with me the ZTE Axon 60. Let's do a full review, let's get started. I must anticipate you that this device I consider to be too expensive for what it offers. The most recommendable from my point of view if you are considering this device would be to go for the Axon 60 Lite, which is the light edition of last year's model, but still pretty much the same as what we find in this device. Obviously there could be some slight differences, but overall I could tell you that it's going to be the same experience at a much lower price point, so I would recommend that option more. But anyway, we're going to describe what we found here because it's curious that within the purchase comes with a smartwatch included, so if you're interested in getting the combo, it might come off as a little bit more attractive option. But if they are selling it to you without the smartwatch, definitely don't consider it. Its launch price in Mexico is 3,699 pesos. That's approximately $200. Remember that the prices here are not the same as over there. In Mexico, taxes are included, and since it comes hand in hand with Teltel's distribution, it is likely that this is why the price is a little higher. It does not really have many arguments to compete against devices in the same price range, but its main argument will be the 256 gigabytes of storage, which is obviously the most attractive. But join me in getting to know the rest of the features. From the front, we will find a traditional design. Fortunately, it doesn't have a notch drop design, and that makes it look a bit more modern. Obviously, we will find screen with rounded corners. The bottom bezel will be a bit thicker, but it doesn't disappoint. In this sense, it complies well, although it does not offer us any level of protection with Gorilla Glass or something similar for the screen. On the right side is the power button with an orange highlight and also the volume buttons. As you can notice, the frame is completely reflective, although we are obviously talking about plastic that tries to look like metal. The top frame has absolutely nothing on it. While on the left side is placed the tray where we can have a micro SD card and the nano SIM card. In some regions, the second SIM card slot may be unlocked, but in Mexico it is locked thanks to Telcel. And at the bottom is the headphone jack plus a microphone, then the USB port, and finally the speaker. This device has a weight of 210 grams and its thickness is 8.2 millimeters. It does not have any level of resistance against water, and besides this purple edition, it is also available in black and gold color. The screen has a very good size, and that is one of its favorable aspects since it is 6.72 inches in its diagonal. But we are going to find very bad viewing angles. It is a simple screen that is going to be good if you are going to view the content from the front. If you are going to share content with your friends, those who are viewing the content from the side will not distinguish anything at all because the brightness and color intensity is greatly reduced. But I insist, from the front, the content is still displayed with good quality. In this case, the good news is that it has a full HD plus resolution of 2400 by 1080 pixels, reaching a pixel density of 391 pixels per inch. So that's very good considering the price range. But it's only a 60Hz display, which in the middle of 2024 falls a little short, although remember that the iPhone SE and iPhone 15 still have 60Hz displays. In that sense, we could say that it is an equal screen, although obviously in the rest of features it is a completely inferior screen, but it is a screen that does not seem to be so modern. So when scrolling the screen, you might notice that it's not that modern, but it's something you won't notice if you haven't tried screens over 60 Hz. The brightness I think is high enough, and with respect to the lower brightness, it's also comfortable for nighttime or indoor use. Also, in the accessibility options, there is an additional dimming option that could help you to have more comfort. And speaking of comfort, it also integrates several settings such as reading mode, which will grayscale the screen, also the night mode, which will add a blue light filter, and you can customize its intensity and also reduce the white point. So overall, the screen experience can be very comfortable and good enough, but for personal use. This device only integrates one speaker, which is expected in this price range, so we couldn't criticize it for that. But let's listen to a small test. The speaker is not bad at all. It emits a sound with an acceptable quality for the price range. The volume is standard, although as you noticed it has a boost mode that will try to increase the gain. Although in general I noticed that it increases the presence of mid-frequencies and high frequencies, so it actually distorts the sound a bit in that mode, but you could activate it if you want the maximum possible volume. And like several ZTE devices, it incorporates DTS sound, where we can find different sound presets if we want to activate some kind of special sound. You can also activate bass boost or enhance mids or treble boost. So in general, you could get to have some level of equalization, although we could not specifically categorize it as an equalizer, but at least it allows you to slightly modify the style of sound that is emitting. And if you use headphones, you can select the type of stereo sound you're going to have. But speaking of headphones, the ZTE's headphone jack is present here, an addition that is completely useful and necessary in this price range. Because if you prefer to use wireless headphones, you should know that the quality will be very basic because it only supports the SVC codec. It does not even support AAC, confirming that it is an extremely basic device. And at this price, I think you will find other devices with higher quality Bluetooth audio. In addition, the device only incorporates a microphone, so it does not even support stereo sound recording. If you cover the microphone, you are going to have a very poor quality. Let's listen to a test.
Este audio ha sido grabado con el micrófono integrado del ZTE Axon 60. Voy a cubrirlo para que capte una buena calidad.
Obviously, the microphone will be quite simple. This could easily be one of its weak points because in the price range you are going to find better audio pickups. Below you will see a video recorded with this device configuring the system in my living room at maximum volume. As you can see, although it has noticeable distortions, I think it is not a disaster as I expected when I saw that it was only a microphone, so it did not disappoint me in this regard. The front camera is supposedly 32 megapixels, although I'm pretty sure these are interpolated pixels. In reality, the camera could easily be considered 4 megapixels. The aperture is f2.0 and has fixed focus. It has no shortcut for speedy entry into the camera, and obviously the capture experience is not considered very snappy. Although curiously, it has disabled the capture animation, so you almost do not realize the moment in which it has already taken the picture. You only realize it because the gallery preview is being updated, but disabling these animations allows the capture to be more agile. Obviously, you will not have burst here in the front camera, but it does have a beauty mode where at the bottom you will activate different parameters. It even allows you to modify the size of the lips and many other things that are usually not available in this price range. It's also going to give you access to a list of filters that you can't preview in real time, but it's a nice variety. The front-facing camera on this device is definitely going to be simple. It's not going to offer us an exaggeratedly high level of detail or anything. It's very simple pictures. In backlit scenes, it clearly doesn't look optimized. And after taking the picture, the face comes out well, the illuminated area comes out well in terms of lights, but it's curious that it creates a ghosting effect because it takes a long time to perform the HDR effect. So you need to have the cell phone as static as possible to avoid something like this happening. But we made a second attempt and again the result looks very similar with a ghosting effect in the background. So in backlight, even though it does a good job of highlights and shadows, actually because of the long exposure, the result can be very fatal. And at night, if you're in a well-lit environment, I think the result is still nice considering its price. Although in backlit night scenes a lot more noise will appear, it loses a lot of definition, and the most lit areas will come out very overexposed. So here you can tell it's a simple device. But notice how even a night portrait came out with a good quality, and considering its price, I think it's very good. And in the daytime, if you don't have some other object near you, I think the result is also positive. The cropping may be a bit aggressive in some areas, but I insist that for its price it's fine. We could not expect something much more sophisticated. On the back we find 3 cameras to the surprise of many because in this price range usually devices only come with 1 or 2 cameras. But don't be so surprised, the main camera and the one that will really work well is the 18mm one that is placed in this part. It is a considerably wider camera than the rest of the traditional smartphone cameras. Its sensor is 50 megapixels and offers us f1.8 aperture with autofocus. Then we will find the macro and depth cameras that are nothing more than 2 megapixels. I honestly don't consider them to be useful cameras, so I would have liked the budget invested in these cameras to have been invested in a second microphone or a slightly more advanced processor. Obviously, like any camera, it will have some lag in the viewfinder, but it also has some lag when capturing the picture, so it takes almost a quarter of a second for the picture to be taken. And it has a burst of up to 30 pictures, and it takes almost half a second to start, and obviously the distance between one picture and the next is considerably high, but for the price range it's a burst that could be useful. By touching the screen we can adjust exposure and focus, and interestingly in this case it does include a Pro mode. Here it allows us to manage the compensation, also the shutter speed. Although in reality the shutter speed does not allow us to modify it, but we can modify the focus, also the ISO that can reach up to 10,000. The white balance and some other settings such as contrast or saturation, but it does not allow RAW photography. It is not possible to scan QR codes directly on the camera, but it includes a direct access to Google Lens. So in this application it will be possible to scan this type of codes, but it is necessary to press the button to search. And another important absence will be the document scanner that is not present or as an additional mode, so you will have to buy some application to do that action. The device does have a high-resolution mode where you can take 50 megapixel pictures, but it is quite complicated to get a very detailed result. Notice how in this case the picture does not appear to be 50 megapixels. Objects that are a little bit moving are going to come out poorly defined. You need to take an extremely static photograph to try to take advantage of the 50 megapixels. Otherwise, the picture looks very plain. In fact, it is advisable to take pictures only in automatic mode to achieve a better color balance and more. But even though the photo is 13 megapixels, the result also looks simple in terms of detail. So it is not very advanced in this aspect, but it is an economical device. And regarding the zoom, it will also be simple. Photography at 2x does not maintain optical quality, and definitely at 5x still manages to achieve good enough quality, but it is clearly digital zoom. And in 10x it struggles for not having stabilization, although if you make several attempts maybe you get to have a sharp enough image, but it is not its specialty. It wasn't something we would expect at this price point, so it's within the acceptable range. In backlit scenes that aren't too aggressive, the preview doesn't look bad at all. And the result is also in line with what we might expect. Again, we see a very poorly detailed image, but the balance of highlights and shadows is fine. Perhaps the shadows are slightly darker than we would like. But in the evenings, it is confirmed that this is a very simple device. In auto mode, the picture looks very overexposed in the brighter areas, very dark in the darker areas. Although it notes that the night mode makes a better balance, we have a better exposed photograph even in the darkest areas, so night mode does seem to work well. Here you are looking at another example with auto mode and then night mode, but in this area which is very dark, it seems to overdo it with respect to the increase in light and also doesn't increase the level of detail. Macro photography is good with the main camera, although you can't get too close, and obviously the digital zoom doesn't help much. And look at the result that the macro camera would be able to give you. It's definitely not very nice. It's a very simple camera with very low quality in terms of capturing colors and more. So the recommended thing to do is to take macro captures with the main camera. By the way, motion captures are not its specialty as expected. In bright environments you'll have the best performance, but even then it still doesn't come out as sharp. And for portrait photography, note that the beauty effect is exaggerated by default. It also has very low definition. It's not able to detect the foreground very well. So even though it has the portrait photography option, the result will not be good. For video recording, we will find Full HD at the highest quality both on the back and on the front. Interestingly, this device allows us to turn off the microphone for video recording and also turn off face detection in case you want to record backlit without the whole background being completely burned out. And when recording video, it has a slider for zooming without quick shortcuts. You can also take pictures and pause and resume video, but it doesn't let you turn on the flashlight or rotate to the front camera before you have your recording. Video recording will also be simple. The focus seems to be constantly struggling even in good lighting conditions, so it confirms to us that it's a very simple video. Also, the colors don't look as accurate and there are also some abrupt changes in the white balance. The zoom will also be very simple, and again we will find problems with the focus even when zooming in. So it's been a long time since I've tested a device really this bad at shooting video. But note that curiously in this type of backlit scenarios, the result was good in terms of light and shadow balance. Although in this case it doesn't seem to detect the faces and that's why there are not some jumps so aggressive, but honestly I prefer this setting compared to other devices that when detecting the face come to overexpose excessively the background. So in this case, the backlit video, curiously I liked it, not taking into account obviously that again it is struggling too much with the focus. And at night or in low light conditions, it's obviously going to struggle even more with focus. Also, there is more noise present. Again, you will notice a lot of sudden color shift in some scenes, and in darker areas it won't be able to capture the lighting well. So it is very clear to us that this is not a device that stands out for this section. Also remember that the level of detail is going to be simple, and in this case in night scenes it records at about 25 frames per second. This device does not integrate either digital or optical stabilization, so even when walking in a simple way the movements are very noticeable. Even without walking it looks bad, and obviously when running it will be even more disastrous. So it is not advisable to record video with it. And as we have already seen, the focus struggles. Even in these movements that can be more aggressive, the device still has some complications when trying to focus, so it's not accurate or fast at all. The fast camera mode is also not stabilized, it looks very low level of detail. Although interestingly, you can adjust it from 4x, which could be useful for recording people, and you can turn it up to 1800x, so yes, you could have spectacular shots of landscapes and the like. But whether it is people or landscapes, it is advisable to record with a tripod or a base because otherwise the video will look very low quality. Obviously, it does not support slow motion or any special recording mode. The front camera also records in full HD, but it doesn't have stabilization either, so the result looks very bad. Especially if you are walking, it is not recommended to record with this camera. If you are running, it will obviously be a disaster. In backlit scenes, it will burn absolutely all the background in order to illuminate you well enough, so it will be more advisable to record with the light from the front and not behind. In fact, the front camera does include the setting to detect the face, but you could turn it off in case you want a scene without considering the lighting of your face. But something very curious is that even with the front camera lets you zoom up to 10x, something that very few devices support. Obviously, it will have fixed focus, so you're not going to be able to focus on some close object or something like that. So it's an extremely simple camera. And at night there will be a bit more noise present, although fortunately it performs decently when you're near good light sources, so it's not a complete disaster, but it is a significant amount of noise that reveals itself in the darker areas. And obviously if you're in an area where there's not as much lighting, more noise will appear, but I think it does get to be remarkable the level of detail it achieves, especially considering its price. Although I must be clear, and yes, there are other devices in this same price range that will offer you a better video capture in general. This device incorporates Android 13 with iOS 13. That is, it comes outdated from the factory, which is clearly bad news. That's why I was telling you that basically the Axon 50 Lite could give you the same experience for less price. It also does not have a clear update policy, and it is highly likely that it will not receive Android 14 through an update, but if it does receive it, it will be the only one and it will obviously remain outdated over time. The device includes few features that distinguish it from the rest. That is, although it has some tools like themes and the like, it is something that we see in other devices. The level of customization is what pure Android achieves. Although this super lock feature could be changing the wallpaper of your lock screen, but it is something that I personally do not like, so it's up to you if you want to use it or not, but personally I do not find it something very remarkable. Another point we could highlight from their software is something they called Active Island. Notice that it has some animations to take advantage of the camera cutout, mainly to show the battery percentage when you start the charging process, and also, if you activate some timer and exit the app, you will notice that that timer will continue in that area. So it could become a useful tool, although it does not have more actions. You simply press on this button to go back to the main application, and the same thing will happen, for example, while you are recording some audio and possibly while you are on some call and similar things, but it does not have a music player in that area. It also brings the traditional gestures and movements that basically all smartphones have, just highlight the possibility of shaking the device inside the lock screen to turn on the flashlight, But overall, it is an extremely simple operating system that only modifies the aesthetics of pure Android but retains virtually the same functionality, so it does not stand out in this section. The only thing I like is that you can scroll down the list of various system apps so you can easily reach them with one hand, which is something few smartphones these days have. Obviously remember that it has an optical drive on the Z-axis and is not very exploited in the system when interacting with different elements. The side fingerprint reader that brings this device allows up to 5 different records. So you have good variety to register all your trusted people, or you can register multiple fingers. The operation will be good, sincerely unlocks very fast, you do not need to rest your finger for too long, and also has an option to quickly open an application depending on the fingerprint you register. For example, with the fingerprint 2, you could directly open Facebook or whatever you want. It also has simple 2-dimensional facial unlocking, and the password manager is from Google but does not seem to have an optimal performance. Notice how it only fills in one of the fields, plus it does not verify through fingerprint first that it is indeed me who is filling in the information, although you could modify that in the settings, but it can become a bit complex. Fortunately, ZTE also incorporates an application called My Vault, which is a kind of secure folder where you can access through your fingerprint or a pattern that can be different from the lock screen. Here you can have stored applications, images, videos, files, or also passwords, but the passwords you store here, you cannot fill them so easily in forms. It does not have a child mode or a specific application lock, although in My Vault, as I showed you, you can also store applications. Nor does it incorporate ZTE's own VPN, nor does it have a malware scanner in collaboration with a company or something similar. You are completely dependent on Google Play Protect. It also does not incorporate a child mode and other features that you would usually find in other systems customized by other companies. The battery is 5000 milliamps, and in my tests it performed less than expected. Normally, in testing with the drainer in the foreground, devices with these batteries give us about 4.5 hours. This one gave us 3.5 hours, so the difference is considerable. Possibly your processor is not as power efficient. Running the drainer in the background while watching videos in the foreground, it went up to 4.5 hours, so at least it seems that it does manage applications running in the background well. Although in this case its management can get to be overkill and it constantly closed the drainer. What does this mean in everyday life? Well, that some apps will probably stop sending you notifications or something similar. So if there are applications that are very important to you and you want to keep them running in the background, it is important that you enter this section and manually configure that you want to allow them to run in the background. The device incorporates 2 power-saving modes, a basic one for everyday use and a more aggressive one for emergency situations, so it could prove to be very useful considering it's not going to stand out much for its battery life. The charger included in the box is 22.5 watts. In this regard, it is indeed going to give us a noticeably better experience than many competitors in this price range. Unfortunately though, the battery doesn't seem to support as much fast charging. So, despite having a powerful charger, the charging wasn't really that fast. In 15 minutes it recovered 17%, in 30 minutes 31%, and obviously at the end the charging became much slower. So it finished charging in practically 2 hours. And if you intended to leave your cell phone charging all night, let me tell you that it doesn't have a smart charging mode. So you are going to deteriorate your battery a lot if you leave the device charging all night. Definitely, the experience could be improved a lot. As for connectivity, it supports 4G networks and does not have a data blocking mode where you can select which apps will be able to connect to the internet using your mobile data. It only has a data saving mode, but it is not very advanced. Obviously, it won't support eSIM either, we'll leave that for more expensive devices. And it supports connectivity for Wi-Fi 5 networks, so it doesn't have that much download speed. It doesn't have NFC, but it does have FM radio, an important element in devices of this price range. Although you obviously need to connect headphones to use it. Surprisingly, it also supports the option to stream screen, and not only to Chromecast but also to other screens, which is positive. In fact, it also has Android Auto, although it lacks many sensors such as gyroscope or geomagnetic field sensor, but the proximity sensor is completely physical. ZTE currently doesn't have an advanced ecosystem or anything similar. It doesn't have many of its own branded devices to complement this one, i.e., it doesn't have its own line of headphones or anything similar, and even though they include a smartwatch, it doesn't seem to have much interaction with this device. So the ecosystem is limited entirely to the things that Google can come up with. I mean, yes, you can have fast file sending with quick share or easy pairing with hearing aids through Google FastPay, but you are completely dependent on Google. Likewise, you are dependent on Google for control of home devices and for cloud storage. So in that sense, it is perceived as little strength in the brand. Let's go now to test the performance achieved by this device that integrates the Unisoc T616 processor, a processor that is usually used in entry-level devices, confirming that this device is not going to focus too much on high power. It also comes accompanied by 6 GB of RAM, which is good news because in this segment there are still other devices that integrate 4 GB of RAM, but we will test in a moment if it really gets to take advantage of that RAM or not. Either way, through the settings, it allows you to go up to 10 GB of additional virtual RAM, so let's test it with that setting. As you can see, it took 4.4 seconds to open each of the apps, showing that it's a bit of a weak device when it comes to power. Navigating within the apps could get to look a little bit stumbling at times, but note that in this case, we're getting a smooth enough experience even with all these apps open in the background. So it seems that the device has a good management of its RAM. In this respect, it could indeed come to stand out over several competitors that are possibly going to give you much easier performance with respect to running apps in the background. Note that in this case, there has not been any application restarts, although I have 16 applications open, so I think in this respect it does give us performance of a much more expensive device. Possibly this is its strongest point, which is ironic because many people when they see that the processor is Unisoc might be completely disappointed. But I think in this case it is giving us better performance than we would see with other devices in the similar price range with MediaTek processors. So definitely the performance has not disappointed me, and on the contrary has far exceeded the expectations I had considering the processor that this device integrates. And to continue testing the speed of this device, we are going to export a video with a total duration of 1 minute in full HD using clips recorded with this device. While this happens, I tell you that storage has another of its strongest points because you have a lot of capacity to store there, many photographs, many videos and more. And you also have the possibility of placing a micro SD card with what you could still save many more things, although the manufacturer does not indicate what the capacity limit of the micro SD, but it is likely to be a terabyte. And ready, it took about 47 seconds, which for the price range is not bad at all. I think it has enough power to export videos in full HD, although obviously not with the maximum speed. With regard to games, we will not find any special manager or additional tools focused on gaming, although it is clear that at this price it will be very difficult to find a very good gaming experience. In Call of Duty, this device gives us by default the low quality at a medium frame rate. In fact, we can go up to a medium quality with a high rate. So I think it is not so bad in terms of graphics compatibility, but obviously you cannot use a lot of effects due to the limited processor. And in this case, the experience really was very unstable. There are moments where it goes up and moments where it goes down very strongly, so the average was 32 frames per second, but really the experience doesn't feel stable. Fortunately, there was not a moment where it came to stay completely frozen, but it is noted that it is not a very powerful device or something like that, so if your priority is to play and you have this budget, it would be best to look for devices from previous years that have lowered their price, because in this price range, a new device will be difficult to give you a very high performance. In the Legends game, we have the automatic detail, but to put a test according to the price, we put the low detail at 60 frames per second. And with this configuration, the truth is that the device behaved very well, had very good stability, 60 frames per second on average, a few low peaks as we are accustomed to this game. But this simply confirms that if you want to play with a smooth experience using this device, it is advisable to select low graphic qualities. And in the SpongeBob game, the resolution is by default at a low level, and we also lowered the quality to a low level, disabled the smoothing, and kept 60 frames per second to see how it was doing. And the funny thing is that this processor will support the smoothing option, which is not available on other even more expensive processors. But in reality, the performance is not going to be very high, to say the least. It is again going to have a lot of fluctuations in the frames per second. The average was 27. But it is not a device that is going to give us super high performance or anything similar. Although as a consequence, the heating is going to be really very low compared to the heating that we would find on other devices, but it's definitely not a cell phone that's so recommended for gaming. And in this case, we didn't run Genshin Impact, instead we just ran Asphalt 9, selecting 60 frames per second to see what it was capable of, and also selecting the best quality setting. Although remember that Asphalt 9 adjusts the graphics, so the best quality graphics on this processor will not be the same best quality graphics on another processor, and it shows. You don't see the water effects in the camera, you don't see as much dust and as many explosions, and with these settings the device gave us 36 frames per second. The experience was with several fluctuations again when analyzing and monitoring the frames per second, but overall it's a game that runs well. Obviously, if you run content tailored to this price point, you could have a good gaming experience, at least the acceptable. Although in graphical experience in terms of details and effects, it obviously comes up quite short. And that brings us to the end of this video. As I told you from the beginning, I wouldn't recommend buying this device too much. If you are interested, what I would recommend more would be to go for last year's Axon 50 Lite, which will give you a very similar experience. I hope you liked this video. If you did, you know you can point it out, and I'll see you next time.